sometimes we need that sort of someone else to get us, out there. And so that's why I appreciate Scott as well too, where he's kind of like more of the loudmouth of our of our relationship.
For sure, every duo needs that kind of salesman, so to speak. Oh, Eric, are you there? Well, hello again, comic book friends, and welcome to another episode of Comic Converse, the podcast where there's always something new and exciting going on between the covers. My name is Jordan Claes, your host, and today I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by industry legend Eric Nguyen, the co-creator and artist and co-writer of White Savior, a new book being published via Dark Horse Comics. Eric, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you? Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, it's a privilege to be able to speak with you today. And like I said, we've got lots to talk about, so we'll dive right into it. But just in case there does happen to be someone who's, been living in a cave on Mars with their fingers in their ears for the last 10 or so years and doesn't know who you are, Eric's name, I think the majority of us will no doubt recognize from critically acclaimed titles such as Marvel's Old Man Logan and Image Comics' Strange Girl. He has, like I said, been an industry leader for more than a decade now. And we're so excited to be able to speak with him today because he has a brand new book out with his co-creator, Scott Burman, called White Savior. So, Eric, tell us a little bit about White Savior.
Oh, man. Well, it's a big, long story. Like you said, you mentioned, I've been working in this industry for, a long time. I think my first book was Strange Girl with Rick Remender. That was back in like 2007 or something like that, way back there, long time. So it's been a while since I did a creator-owned book. Rick and we did two books together, Strange Girl and Gigantic. And after that, I just been doing more like mainstream books, Marvel, DC, and stuff like that. White Savior came about 7 years ago. Scott, who you guys might not know, but he's gonna be one of the best writers in comics. I mean, his writing is just funny as hell, and the stories are great. And I actually got together with Scott out of just randomness. He emailed me out of the blue. Didn't know who he was. He didn't really write for comics. I guess he was more of a script writer, more of a comedy writer. And he sent me some scripts out of the blue, and at the time, I think I was doing Old Man Logan or Starboy, The Weekend Starboy, one of those two. So I didn't really have time, but after I finished that up, I was like, oh man, I was getting kind of antsy, it was that time where I wanted to do creator own again. I wanted to kind of get back to just letting, my work come out, doing something where you're not so worried about editorials, or you're not worried about how something should look or would look, So I decided to say, let's do. I want to do a creator own, and I read one of just randomly. I read one of Scott's script, and it was just so funny. I think that script name was. How I Got Drunk and Saved the World. So pretty much it's a comedy, right? And so it was fantastic. And so I gave him a call, and he was surprised. And out of nowhere, we just started. We have a great rapport as far as collaborators go. I mean, we're just right on the same page. And because he writes a lot of comedy, I knew that's where I wanted to go. And because this is one of the first time I actually took more of a role in the plotting and writing and all that stuff too. Working with someone that's new also in writing for the industry kind of helped. We're kind of working off each other, helping each other, kind of feel out how this is gonna go. And we just threw around some ideas. And at the time, I think one of the movies that were kind of making me I love Matt Damon, by the way. So this is not a insult or anything to Matt Damon, but there was a movie called The Wall that came out, and and it was about a white guy coming in and saving China and all that stuff, and turns out that it was kind of fun and kind of like, why don't we just, and we both Scott and I were just kind of throwing out jokes, and we was like, then some reason or other the term white savior and with a title like white savior, once we found that, we're like, oh man, that's where we're gonna go. We're gonna go with this whole white savior, anti-white savior trope, and from there we're just throwing out ideas, jokes, how we can poke fun of it in a way where it's kind of just like in a satiric manner, and so not too serious, but also kind of point to that whole thing where the savior is always this white, good-looking, handsome, broad-shoulder, just genius type fella that comes in and saves a village or saves the world or something like that. So that's how we came up with white savior.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I mean, all love and respect in the world to Matt Damon, but it's a lot easier to accept him in a role like Good Will Hunting than it is to see him, slinging bows and arrows off the Great Wall of China. I completely agree with you on that. And like you said, I think,
I mean, his wardrobe was so ridiculous too, It was just
the hair.
Yeah.
No, I completely understand. Now, I've been doing, I mean, you and Scott have been busy, to say the least. I've spent the last few days, I think, watching every single interview that you guys have recorded and reading everything that's kind of come out in the press. So I know that Scott is typically the one who kind of defaults to doing the elevator pitch. So if it's okay with you, again, for anyone who might not be caught up, I'll just kind of bring the audience up to speed, because like you said, White Savior is definitely a very cleverly written, beautifully illustrated satirical miniseries that does poke fun, at the tired and recycled trope of the white savior. Only, like you mentioned, instead of the handsome white knight in shining armor that we see so often in films like The Last Samurai or Dances with Wolves, in your universe, the white savior is a kind of a bumbling idiot, for lack of a better word. A guy who's hell bent on catastrophic failure, the likes of which I heard you mention can really only be compared to the sinking of the Titanic or the explosion of the Hindenburg. So, and I really love, as well, the story is, of course, told through the scope of the protagonist, Todd Parker, who, after being sent backwards in time to feudal Japan, basically has to convince this clan of warring samurai not to listen to the great white savior and to save the village of Inoki from sure and assured doom. So like I was saying, for anyone who might not have read the first two issues, that's kind of where we're at right now. And issue 2 has just recently hit the shelves. I have to say, you guys are throwing curveballs left, right, and center. Just when I sort of thought I knew where we were headed, my mind is just blown all over again. So how has the reception been now that the second issue has been on the shelves for a little more than a week now?
Oh man, it's the reception for the whole thing has been really good. By the way, your pitch is very, I mean, that was very well done. Thank you very much. I mean,
hey, thank you.
He usually does that because he practices it all the time. And me, I don't like to practice that sort of thing because I don't want to come off as kind of too, robotic or something like that. But that was awesome, man. That was fantastic.
Hey, thank you. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to do the heavy lifting at the end of the day.
Yeah, but the responses have been really good. And even the second one, people, because we threw a lot of jokes in the first one, and the comedy was really, people say the comedy is really good. And there were words that maybe, it would lose that in the second one. But a lot of people, from what I've read and from whom I've talked to, is like, man, they said we kept up the comedy and it's even more. And we do things at the end where people didn't expect it. When we came about the whole idea of where we're going to go with it too, we were going back and forth, and we just wanted to do something kind of a little unexpected, and so that's what happens in number 2, and where we go next with it, it's even a little bit crazier. So I hope you guys continue on. It's a 4-issue series, so it will have an end to it. Yeah, but so far so good.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And you're spot on as far as I would say without any exaggeration. The second issue is actually, I found it to be even funnier than the first, which again, in and of itself was pretty hilarious at times. So I was really, really happy to see that. And just speaking about the comedy while we're kind of on that subject, I know that there have been kind of movies thrown around, Airplane, Blazing Saddles. Are there any sort of other comedic influences that you draw on, or any films or even comedians that you kind of were inspired by when it came down to kind of writing some of the humor for this book?
Well, that's the thing about why I knew that Scott was the perfect partner for this type of book. I mean, for me, I go towards more of I like those Chappelle comedy. I like comedy where the kind of they point out kind of politically sensitive, politically kind of comedy to it, and I tend to like that. I don't get offended very often, and I think it's kind of funny. When you think of like Mel Brooks or Blazing Saddles, it's back in that age, it was funny as heck, right? But nowadays, it's kind of more, depending on who you talk to or something like that, just they'll take it. But I'm older school in that manner, but Scott, he knows a lot more about comedy. He writes comedy, and he'll throw out things that I didn't even know, but make it in a way where it's not so serious, but it's funny too. And so, like I said, that's why when it came to deciding on who I wanted to work with as a creator, I knew that that's where I needed to go, and it turned out to be the right choice.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And just circling back, because I find this absolutely fascinating how your partnership came to be, because, without trying to pump your tires or anything like that, you're at an age and stage in your career where I can presume pretty much work with whomever you want in this industry. And I can only imagine that your inbox must be flooded with hopeful young budding creators who are looking to do exactly what Scott did. And I just think it really shows you could have very easily thrown up a wall and been like, listen, bud, like, I'm Eric Nguyen. I don't need to be like answering this email. But I think like that complete lack of ego, I think it's very impressive that even though you've been doing this for so long, you don't shut yourself off to anything. Would you say that that's kind of an accurate description?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. A lot of times, which is odd when people hear this, that I will help out anyone as far as art goes. I'll get random emails about, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you do, and actually I get a lot of when my friends' kids find out I'm an artist, right? Oh my God, you draw comics and stuff. I love helping young artists, and maybe giving them ideas that potentially there's a way to be an artist, and it's not just like a throwaway sort of hobby. And so I respond to a lot of just young artists, and so I think that's what made me kind of respond to Scott in a way where he's trying something, and again, I always read a lot of the emails, and if I can help on something, I would. And so when I saw his email, it's something that he sent to me to read now, and I read it. Just like I'll look through people's portfolios, whether it's good, bad, or anything. If I can give some sort of suggestion or direction, I do that anyway. So it's just something I enjoy doing. I don't have a gate or any sort of, oh man, this guy's nothing. Everyone's something, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, and I agree with you. I mean, I don't think without any exaggeration, I think Scott's writing is very good. It seems when I'm reading this, this doesn't to me read as someone's first kind of kick at the can when it comes to writing a comic book. You know what I mean? It's, and you could have, for all we know, you could have discovered the next big writer in comics. Who knows what's going to come from this book, right?
Yeah, that's what it is. Just like I said, when I read his script, I've read other scripts before, and you know, I think I was at the point where I know who could be ready for it at least, you know, and just reading just reading what he wrote, I just knew that he definitely he has a lot of things that he's written. Just wait until people actually read those and get it to the right hands. I think he, just like anyone else, you don't know until they're actually discovered, then they become big or something like that. Who knows, right?
For sure, for sure. Now, I also know that this, the timing of this, as you said, kind of came at the perfect moment, because I've certainly heard you speak about, and you even mentioned it when we first got on, you had a desire to return to creator-owned books. And in more than a few interviews, I've heard you mention that doing a creator-owned title or creator-owned books allow you a certain amount of freedom as an artist that you just don't necessarily get when you're working with, like the big two, like Marvel, DC, for example. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on that? Like when you talk about like the freedom as an artist, what kind of freedoms are you afforded with a book like White Savior that you might not be with a book like Old Man Logan?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's not really it's a internal freedom. I'm sure that all the people I've worked with at Marvel, DC, they're like, do whatever you think is right for the book. But a lot of times, as an artist, I would put myself too far as what do other people think or might want in a book like this. And when you do your own creator-owned book, there's no preconception of what it is or what it could be. It's just me coming up with something out there without any sort of if I was a reader of this book, what would I want, right? If I'm a reader of Old Man Logan, what would I want to see? And I go through that too much sometimes. I think I would self-censor myself, and with a book like a creator-owned book like White Savior, it's a great example I always love to bring up is Strange Girl, because that was my first book in comics, period. Didn't have any experience doing panel to panel storytelling. It was just, hey, I got introduced to Rick had a book, a concept, and I did some concept art, and I said, okay, sure, we'll do a book. And so when I did Strange Girl, I had no preconceived notion of what this should look like, except just random images of what I read from the script. Mm-hmm. And so with that sort of freedom, it was fun, and it lent itself to a different style that was actually unique at the time. The whole open line cell shading sort of thing. Not many people were doing it. And so, I wanted to get back to that, doing another creator-owned book. Mm-hmm. And so that's what you see in White Savior. Lots of broken panels, lots of figures walking from one panel to the next, but also making the whole time scene pacing work correctly. I don't get that many chances to do that sort of storytelling, working with something else.
Yeah, no, and I can completely, I think, understand where you're coming from. I mean, if you were, say, doing a character like Batman and you wanted to give him a rainbow colored cape, I'm sure that there would be some people who would be like, what the heck are you doing?
It might work now, right?
It might work now. I mean, who knows? That is very true. But, and I guess I also wanted to ask, do you notice any sort of difference between the fandoms of, say, like character or people or audiences who are really devoted to, say, like, superhero comics like Batman like DC and Marvel, as opposed to those who are more so into the creator-owned stuff? Like, do you find them to be a little bit more in the vein of like gatekeepers, whereas creator-owned readers are a little bit more open to that kind of, surprise or freedom, as you call it?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the market, I'm not sure if, because a lot of the times when I do work now, it seems like I'm catering to a certain older comic book reading market, right? People who've always bought comic books back in the day, where it was a lot of for me, I come from, though, when McFarlane's came on the scene, you know, it's all about the art, and Jim Lee's and stuff like that, all about the art, pushing the books and everything. Then it went to a story writer kind of importance. So nowadays, I'm not quite sure if we're bringing in the youth market or any, you know, that's a hard question, because that's more of a, because when we're doing our book, like Scott and I, we were actually looking towards to making a wider accepting book, not really a superhero book. Mm-hmm. We were just trying to, you know, one, create a comedy. Two, it just landed, you know, happenstance to be hitting on a subject that about representation or identification, you know, white savior and all that stuff. It just happened, you know, mm-hmm. from 6 years ago to now is more prevalent. But we were not really looking to cater specifically to a superhero readership.
Mm-hmm. No, and I can completely see where you're coming from. So for me, it was just more, again,
fun. Yeah, for me, it's just fun getting to redo my art in a way where I'm not so stressed out about or concerned about how something should look. And so for me, it was a challenge. Okay, if I were to do a new book now where I had no boundaries to it, what would it look like? And so it looked like this for now. So my next book might look totally different. So I don't know.
Excellent.
Who knows? But that's the fun of being able to do this type of work at this point of my you know, my art career.
No, and I can completely understand that. And getting back to the art of white savior, I find it interesting that you know, let's call it a disagreement for lack of a better word, but the only disagreement that you and Scott had when it came to the art, as far as I understand, was the cover for issue 1. I mean, the original cover concept that you had was quite a lot different than the final one that we end up seeing. And I know that Scott was the one, I think, who was initially well, why don't you explain? Because I think it was that you two needed to really push it, that it was a satire, because the name can be a little bit contentious and polarizing, correct?
Yeah, you know, you know, before, like 6 years ago when we just started, right? Again, the political climate wasn't it is now. Here is really, you know, there's lots of sensitivity out right now. But back then, you know, when we first started, when we were first doing it, because I come from such a hardcore kind of comic and heroic and, you know, muscles and all that stuff, my initial cover was just some, you know, this white savior guy with a sword and looking menacing with muscles, and he just looks like a badass, you know. So I was like, Scott, look at this. It's cool, right? It's cool, right? Scott goes, oh, man, it's cool, all right, but we're going to get skewered, you know, the white savior. I mean, just look at the title itself, white savior. This guy looks like a badass white savior. And so he go, man, you know. So, and he told me, we got to make it funnier. We got to make it more like, what is that magazine, Mad Magazine or something, where we need to really make sure that people, when they see the cover, it's cool, but also says, oh man, this is going to be a funny kind of comic book. And so, which, like I said, it turned out to be the right choice, because when we did the second cover, Scott actually had to pose as far as his face, you know, what kind of gesture that he was looking for. And it actually helped me get that kind of funny, goofy, cross-eyed look for the white savior. You know, it's just some idiot who has the arrow through his head, you know, so.
Well, that's what I love most about it, because as soon as I saw it, like the arrow through the head, I immediately thought of Steve Martin, like those old stand-up routines when he used to come out with the arrow on his head. So when you see that image juxtaposed with the title, I think it completely delivers on what you guys were looking to do. So I agree with you. I certainly do feel that was the right choice. And it is kind of cool that you were able to make a little bit more of a return to form, and deliver a pretty badass cover for issue number 2.
The funny part about that is because I already did 2 covers for the first one, I kind of just kept doing 2 covers for each, for the issue too. So which turned out to be just some random, luck. Because each cover, I was able to get the chance to do, and Dark Horse said, yeah, if you want, you go ahead and do it. So each one of them has 2 covers, but the second cover has a sort of like an old sepia tone to each one. It's kind of more of a serious cover, kind of more of an artsy cover that allowed me just to do a cover that I enjoyed, yet do a kind of comic book or another cover that Scott liked. So both of us, it gave us 2 different covers. It just gives more variety, I guess. And it turned out that I enjoyed doing it. It wasn't work. It was actually something that we created that actually was fun to do. So each issue has 2 covers now.
And I think that's actually so cool, just how that kind of came about, like completely organically.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure if we mentioned it already, but this is kind of your first crack at, taking on some of the writing responsibilities that go along with the book as well. How did you find balancing the kind of, writer and artist sides of your brain? And did you find it difficult? Did you take to it naturally? Can you explain a little bit about that for us?
When you're an artist and you read all these scripts before and you work with so many different writers and I've worked with great writers. Rick was fun writing. John Reiber, who did Sandman Mystery Theater, his scripts were like books. I mean, 50 to 60 pages for a single issue. And it was so dense, but in a way where I enjoyed reading it like a novel. It gave so much detail on what he was trying to say and paneling. So I love that too. And so I've worked with so many great writers, some that just give plot, what's his man? I can't get the name offhand, but that's where one of the type of scripting that I really enjoy with him was the Marvel method, where it's just more like a script that just gives key plot points and lets the artist do a lot of the pacing itself. Then the writer will go back in and script it to make it work, to make it flow better. And I always find that seemed to not only help with the speed in which we can get this done. 2, it also helps with making sure that the storytelling and the scripting works with each other, pacing wise. Sometimes if everything is so pre-written, sometimes paneling and what needs to go in a certain panel may not fit. And a lot of times if it doesn't fit, a lot of the art will get covered if I didn't break it down correctly. And that just happens all the time. You're trying to do a good looking book, a good looking page. And sometimes you try to be sensitive to the balloons. Sometimes there's not enough space for it. And so, there's always that balance that you're trying to do. But when you're working with it as a Marvel method type, where it's just more of a plot script versus a fully written, developed script, gives a lot more room to add and subtract. And so that's how Scott and I did it, where we knew where we wanted to go. We knew these sort of key scenes that we needed for each issue and the jokes that we were trying to get in at the same time. So that allowed me to pace the scene, the jokes, and just the paneling to make sure that the jokes hit on the right reaction, let's say reaction scene or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it seems like the way that you're describing it, it's a lot more freeing and almost kind of comes about like like jazz, you're just kind of riffing off one another and playing to one another's strengths.
That sort of method gives a lot of collaboration, and that's very good when you're doing creator-owned work that way.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. Now, I also wanted to talk to you about something, because since the release of this book, there have been a lot of whispers that White Savior could potentially be developed into a movie. I found it interesting because I know that you guys have been asked, okay, it's a movie, cast your characters. And, you've answered that, and they're good answers. I know you said Stephen Nguyen for Todd, and I think Scott said Terry Crews for Neil. But what I found interesting is that you, or the two of you, but I'm pretty sure it was you who answered this, said that you were more concerned with who might direct a film like White Savior as opposed to who would star in it. And I know that you threw out Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert as two possible names, or perhaps that was Scott. But I was just sort of wondering, what is it about? I mean, now that Everything Everywhere All at Once is out, maybe it's a stupid question to ask what you think they could bring to a book like this. But from what I understood, it wasn't even that. It was Swiss Army Man, or their film Swiss Army Man, that initially drew you to them. Is that correct?
Well, I think that was more Scott. Scott's very much into film and directors but you are right though, because of one, the message that we're trying to get, the message of the book, The White Savior. It really does have some sort. It really needs to be taken on where this is a comedy, because if you get too serious with trying to relate a message, you miss out on what got you there in the first place. And I think what makes our book successful is that we focus more on the comedy more than trying to push a narrative or a message, right? And so our job, or what made it fun for us, is it was all the comedy. The message was more like it's there, and we put fun at it, and we kind of sprinkle other kind of stereotypes in there too as well, but we don't hammer people with it, we don't go overboard with it. We do it by just making things funny and putting in circumstances that actually a lot of people in their daily lives will relate to, or think back and say, oh yeah, that did happen, or we're not too far off.
No, totally. And I agree with you. I think it's definitely important that if this was to say, go into kind of production, the comedy element certainly needs to be captured. And I find it interesting because in issue 2, I think you guys even call out in the editor's notes that Netflix is essentially going to have to eventually come and pick this up and make a series out of it. And I wanted to ask you, just because I personally do think that the potential for this, in my humble opinion, which is nothing at the end of the day, but it does seem to lend itself well to a streaming series. And I was kind of like, are you familiar with, again, I'm in Canada, so I'm unsure of how far our media actually stretches and if you guys even are aware of it, but there's a guy named Ins Choi who created the show Kim's Convenience, which was actually the spot where Simu Liu kind of got his start before he got cast in Shang-Chi. And I think that someone like that would just do such a fantastic job of being able to capture that comedic element, but be able to tell this story on kind of a small screen sort of level.
Definitely. Scott's aware of that. He's actually been trying to reach out to some of the people that he thinks would, because he's, like I said, he's more more involved with the comedy side, and he's written comedies before that. He knows a lot more about that. But yeah, when you bring up Kim's Convenience, definitely something that we've been trying to reach out to, and we actually we've been getting fantastic support from the Asian community, and which to me, I'm actually kind of surprised on how much they are supporting comic books, and also, this book of, white savior.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we and surprisingly, actors and woman of the year people supporting it, or following us on Instagram. It's just pretty, for me. I find it odd, or surprising. Why would like I said, I'm not a very social person as far as the whole social media. But when we started getting that, I was like, man, it was just fun, surprising for me. We've been talking to people who are involved with Fresh Off the Boat and Bullying Empire. It's so funny. To get people from Bullying Empire to like what you're doing on a comic book. So I hope with our good talks out that it will be something streaming, because we got so many more ideas and offshoots and more stories to tell that goes far beyond just the singular white savior trope.
And I think that's just so exciting to hear. And it actually kind of feeds into my next question, ironically enough, because although White Savior is currently being billed as, a 4-issue miniseries, I think what we've discussed already is that the potential for this book is incredibly far reaching. And one of the things that when I look at this, obviously I don't know how the next 2 issues are going to shake out, but I certainly see this. Todd could be kind of transplanted at any point in time throughout history, different eras, different peoples kind of, you could put him, helping out the pharaohs of Egypt or the high priests of the Aztec Empire. And I guess one thing I wanted to ask you, just kind of speaking completely hypothetically, but if you were to put Todd in a different era, or a different time other than feudal Japan, do you have an idea of where or when that might be?
Well, we do make a setup for a sequel at the end of the 4th issue. So we do have a setup for a sequel for the 4th, where he goes, it's reminiscence of what is it? What's that show? Back to the Future, sort of like how we set that up. So it's a calling a little bit to that, but it's fun, and we definitely make a good setup for that.
Well, that's fantastic, because that's literally my favorite movie, or one of my favorite movies of all time, and arguably I think one of the best film trilogies as well.
Oh yeah, the way they crafted that was amazing.
Yeah. Again, up until that point, right? Yes, it's 3 distinct movies, but it really is just one long film that's being told over 3 chapters. So I think that's so great that the potential for this is, or for White Savior is certainly there. Now, if I can,
when you talked about some of the stuff that you were just mentioning, where different points of time and everything, we kind of sort of sprinkled a little bit of that in issue 2 when Maggie did her kind of, you don't know if it's true or not. So, she gives him a slap at the end, but you never know, if she was telling the truth or not.
Okay. So maybe we might have to go back and reread issue 2 for a little bit more subtext and insight there.
Yeah.
Now, just quickly, if we can, just moving away from White Savior for a moment. Like I mentioned, I'm here in Canada. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up my fellow Canadian, Abel Tesfaye, aka The Weeknd, because of course I know that you have done Starboy and that you were handpicked by The Weeknd himself to draw that. Now, as far as I also understand, you have some original artwork that you've been intending to give to him. Has that ever happened? Have you been able to cross paths and pass that along yet?
Not yet. Yeah. When I did work for Marvel on the Weeknd book with Marvel, Starboy, that was such a surprise. when they called me up and said, "Oh yeah, would you like to work on Abel's book?" And I was like, Abel. I was like, because it was a special project that Marvel. I was like, wait. Then when they said the weekend, I'm like, oh my god! So it was a surprise. It was an honor to do it, and man, but it was also a stressful project because the pressure, and you wanted to make it look so good, and you want to make it fit their story, and so it was a great experience. But also when the story, what I keep telling, what I kind of made some, I wouldn't call them mistakes, but because I got so focused doing the work, I didn't do much of the social part of things, right? I didn't post that much on social media. I didn't do any of that where I was telling people, hey, I got assigned to the weekend's book. I'm doing Starboy, and doing all that promotional stuff where it would have, just helped me out as well, and also helped the book out. But I was so focused on doing the work that even my wife, where there was like, you could have met the weekend. Why didn't you? Or because he signed in New York Comic-Con and I didn't go, and just like, oh my God, you could have. And her sister-in-law and everyone knew of. I mean, they're like, oh my God, you should have gotten a selfie, or you should have gotten something, or but because I was just so focused with the work, I should have did more of that. I should have tried to be. I mean, that would have been awesome to meet the weekend. To be,
it would have been cool.
I was like, oh man, when will I get that opportunity again? So
hang backstage, check out a concert. No, I definitely hear you. And like I say, I think that's just so cool. Another thing I wanted to ask you about here,
like you said, whenever
you actually made.
I was gonna say whenever, now, because Scott actually, he was the one who brought it up. Like, you did work for the weekend, and you never did anything for promotional stuff. That's Scott though. Scott's like my Jerry Maguire. He's like, why aren't you out there? And so Scott's the one who's always. So he's kind of made me aware that Scott thinks so highly of my work that, but I don't really promote myself very much, and so but as an artist, we tend to just focus down on work sometimes, and we get kind of our own little bubble and shell, and sometimes we need that sort of someone else to get us out there. And so that's why I appreciate Scott as well too, where he's kind of like more of the loudmouth of our of our relationship.
For sure, every duo needs that kind of salesman, so to speak. Oh, Eric, are you there?
Oh man, I'm sorry.
Oh, and I think Eric is coming back. Eric, we've got you.
Oh, I hope I hope I didn't screw everything up. It went out on me for some reason, and I am sorry.
No, not to worry whatsoever. Again, this is the joys of working with computers and the internet. These things happen, but like I said, the important thing is that we've got you back, so we're all set.
Okay. And, oh my goodness, I was like, what? I had to check where if the plug was right or not. I don't know why it got it went out, but I got the plug back correctly. So I'm sorry about that. Hopefully it didn't. Hopefully it didn't scramble things up too much.
Oh no, I think we'll be just fine. Plus, I have a good friend who serves as our producer, who's constantly working to correct my mistakes. So he'll be able to take care of us and set us straight if there is anything that's gone awry.
Yeah. Again, if something did, you can always have us back on.
Hey, so that'll be great. I was like I said, we would definitely love to have you back on. Now, I know we got cut off there, but just kind of getting back here, I just had a couple things I did want to ask you. And you mentioned this earlier when we first started talking. You mentioned the name Todd McFarlane. I know that Todd has been a very big influence on you and in your career as an artist. Can you kind of talk about how his work influenced you at kind of those beginning stages?
Man, Todd McFarlane, I consider him to be the biggest change in comics for me personally as an artist. He was the one who got me back into comics. Just the pure visual joy of it, the way he redefined how characters are illustrated in comics, because he puts those actual character points into the character that makes them so imaginative. I mean, we can put people in superhero in suits and just make them kind of muscular, but he was the first one who actually put these specific characters of those characters visually into. Yeah, of course, Spider-Man. He contorted Spider-Man to the degree that people loved it. His Hulk was one of the best Hulks I have, even to this day. I love his version of a hulking, stupid kind of just ugly looking Hulk, but amazingly ugly looking Hulk. You know, he's not chisel face, but he's this kind of blocky head with the big eyebrows that are kind of clunky. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, that sort of bold sort of statement that Todd was able to pull off working at Marvel it was mind blowing. It's amazing he pulled it off.
Now, I have to think that you being a fan of his work, having, you know, one of your first creator owned books published at Image, you know, kind of his, well, not just his, but, you know, a company that he helped start and found. I mean, that just seems like such a full circle kind of spectrum as a creator. And I mean, when I see you, like on your Instagram, I saw one of your more recent kind of just work in progress sketches where you're doing Spawn. I mean, like now, to my knowledge, and I scoured pretty hard, but in fairness, there's well over 300 issues of Spawn with alternate covers to boot, plus Gunslinger, plus King Spawn, plus Spawn's Universe. So from what I was able to find, I could not find a cover or a run on Spawn that you had your name to. Am I correct in saying that?
You are correct. I've never been able to meet Todd McFarlane personally. The only time I've ever really met him was when I was a fan before I broke into comics. I stood in line with a Spider-Man comic, the long lines. I think it was either San Diego or one of the bigger cons. And at that time, I was a total fan. You know, got the multiple copies of Spider-Man, the gold and the silver, just waiting in line for him to sign 2 copies. I think he was only limited everyone at the time with 2 copies of something. And, that's the only time I have ever met him. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. Sooner or later, I hope to, connect with him and I would love to do a Spawn cover. It just never came about. I've always been just either doing work for Marvel, DC, or something. It just never. We just haven't crossed that path yet.
For sure.
But I would love to, though. I mean, Spawn. I mean,
that's all you have to say, right? I mean, arguably the most iconic indie comics character of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I think of prospective artists who still, through whatever, walk or path of life, have still not, collaborated on that title, like your name is just so far atop that list. I would love to see you working on a Spawn project. I think that would just be so cool.
That would be that actually would be when people ask what would I want to do next, Spawn would be awesome. When people ask me that, I always think, oh, are they talking about I always jump back to they're probably talking about Marvel or DC, so I give a Marvel DC character, right? But you bring it up. Spawn would be amazing to put Spawn. I wouldn't even know what sort of take I would have on Spawn, So that would be kind of daunting, challenging, but also amazing to do.
Oh, I think if anyone is up to the challenge, it's certainly you. Now, we've been speaking for a bit, and I really just had one kind of last thing, taking it back to White Savior, that I wanted to ask you before we did say goodbye, because one of the things, a very subtle element that I didn't even catch the first time through, it really wasn't until issue 2 that I actually noticed it. But there is a lot of pro wrestling influence in this book, or at least pro wrestling representation, that I don't think a lot of people will notice the first time around. But you kind of slyly slid in a few Japanese pro wrestling superstars into the characters of White Savior, did you not?
Yeah, you know what? I would love to take credit and call myself a genius for that, but that's actually Todd. I mean, that's actually Scott. Scott loves wrestling. He's the one who threw in all those kind of Easter eggs in there. And that's all Scott's doing, playing around with the audience.
Well, again, that certainly doesn't go unnoticed. And I was wondering if it was you or him, because I saw something that you had posted. Again, I think it was on Instagram, where you had mentioned that you were watching one of the more recent UFC fights. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do love UFC. I like generally I like I come from I used to do. Yeah, I used to do a lot of wrestling when I was younger, kind of like the college wrestling sort of thing. And I still keep up with that. I still like to watch collegiate. And so it just turns out that UFC is one of the only sort of sports I still kind of keep up with.
So you don't have any opinions on the upcoming fight between Jake Paul and Tommy Fury then, I'm guessing?
Man, Jake Paul. Initially, I just thought he was, kind of a joke, all that stuff. But man, he messed up a few of these UFC fighters, and they made. I mean, when he knocked out the first guy, what's his name? Oh, man, the first guy with the hair. I forget his name now. I'm so bad with names.
He starched Tyron Woodley. Is that who you're talking about?
No, it was Tyron.
Ben Askren. Ben Askren, I think, is who you mean.
Yeah. Dude, but Ben Askren is a fantastic wrestler. I mean,
yes, he is.
Fantastic. Maybe he didn't take it serious enough, but man, Jake, he knocked him out. Oh my goodness, I was embarrassed. But then when Tyron Woodley said, "Oh man, I'm gonna take you on," and I thought, okay, now he's gonna get his butt whooped. Well, holy cow! When he got knocked out, I was like, man, I give him respect, man.
No, I agree with you, and I mean it was the same thing when
what happened with this Tyra Fury thing.
My heart says Jake Paul. My head says Tommy Fury.
Really? Okay.
Like, and again, I think I agree with you. I thought that Jake Paul was a clown. He was Logan Paul's younger brother. That's what I associated him as being, a kind of a twerp little YouTuber. But when you beat world champion wrestlers, world champion UFC fighters, when you go the distance with Anderson the Spider Silva and win,
right? Holy cow!
You are no longer
Anderson
a joke.
Silva is a great boxer. I mean, his.
I mean, I think what's really exciting is that for the first time, all of the noise where, You're not fighting boxers. You're not fighting guys your own age. All of that is now put to rest. There's no argument that can be made that Tommy Fury isn't a real boxer and that he isn't a serious opponent. So I think this Sunday we're gonna see some sparks fly, and I think the kid might surprise some people. We'll see.
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually rooting for him now. You know, I was like, okay, you know, because he beat up my guys.
I know, right? And I mean, that's the thing. And I think he's so good at playing the heel. You know what I mean? In like that classic 90s WWF like kind of way where he starts off by making everyone hate him. And then by the end, like you said, you can't help but root for this kid.
Yeah. So is this week then, huh?
Yeah, I think it's this the 26th. So that's this Sunday.
Okay,
right?
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for that reminder.
Hey, that's what I'm here for. But anyway, I think we could talk boxing and UFC all night. But you know, I'm sure that you've got better things to do than to sit and chat with me. But for the time that we've spent together, Eric,
fun. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, and again, thank you, because like I said, White Savior, I haven't come across a book in a long time that I've been this excited about so quick right off the bat. It's funny, it's got action, it's got everything that you look for in a comic, and I can't wait to see what you and Scott have in store for us. So thank you.
Well, cool. Well, thank you.
And for anyone who is listening, make sure, if you're not already, you can check out White Savior Comic on Instagram. Go on down to your local comic store and pick up issues 1 and 2, and make sure that you've got it on your monthly pull list for when issue 3 comes around. My name is Jordan Claes, and that's Comic Converse.